All right. Welcome to STEAM Dreamers. Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it. Good afternoon to those of you who are on the East Coast and hope that, wherever you're joining from, you really are excited about our panel. We have this panel every month to really feature women who are in STEM and STEAM to really be able to share with you all, no matter what level you're at, whether you're in middle school, high school, early career, to really talk about, just their experiences, their background. So feel free at any point in time to ask any questions. I'm happy to be with you all again as well. I'm your moderator, Aisha Laurie. I do this every month again. I'm the Senior Director for Programs and Scholarships at NACME, which is the National Action Council for Minorities in Engineering. My background is in electrical engineering. I like to also just mention real life stuff about myself. I'm a first generation college graduate in my family. I'm the oldest of 3 girls. I can't believe I've been married for almost 20 years. I'm like the old married lady now. And I have 13-year-old twins. So definitely keep me in your thoughts as we continue to be homeschooling. But welcome to you all. We have a great panel again this month for you just to share about themselves, their experiences. So again, just feel free to ask whatever questions you have. And I'd like to introduce our panelists. So first we have Dr. Ashley Hutterson. We have Dr. Kristen Lear. We have Marge Cortez. And we also have Dr. Samadi Quinones, pronounced that correctly. So because it is Women's History Month, one of the things that I really wanted our panelists to do was to just give more background on themselves and just to talk about really what Women's History Month means to them. So I'll start with you, Samadi.
Hi, everyone. Like Aisha said, my name is Dr. Samadi Quinones. I am originally from Puerto Rico, but now I live in Sacramento, California, where I work as a lecturer teaching biology at California State University in Sacramento. Aside from teaching in my science, I also dedicate my time to do some art, and my art focuses on promoting women in STEM.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, and the question of what Women's History Month means to me. For me, Women's History Month is the time of the year when we celebrate the different contributions of women to history. It is dedicated time to highlight the successes of women, no matter if they are big or small. And it is also the moment to empower and encourage the next generation of trailblazers that will change our tomorrow.
It's wonderful. Thank you, Samadi. I will go to you next, Kristen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Kristen Lear, and I am a bat conservationist. So I'm coming to you from Fort Collins, Colorado, and I work at Bat Conservation International. We work around the world to protect endangered bat species as well as non-endangered bat species. And I got my start in bat conservation when I was 12 by building bat houses for my Girl Scout Silver Award project. So this has been a lifelong passion, and it's kind of a dream come true to be able to actually do a career that is my passion. And I think for me, Women's History Month really, again, is about highlighting women and looking back at the women that inspired you, but also looking forward and promoting women that are currently doing all this awesome work, and then looking forward to inspire the next generation of STEM pioneers.
Great. Thanks so much, Kristen.
Thank you.
Kristen. Marge?
Yes, hi everyone. So nice to be here and thank you. I'm Marge Cortez. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. My background, as Aisha said, is as a professional engineer. So for about 25 years, I've been in various roles in civil engineering, utilities, and transportation. And now I do also college advising. So I encourage girls who would like to study engineering. And yes, I've been doing that for about 5 years again as an independent practice, and I'm so happy to be here, looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks so much, Marge. Ashley?
I would be the one to do that. Hi, everyone. I wear a couple of hats. As mentioned, I'm the Director of Engineering Education and Outreach at ASME. I'm also an adjunct professor at a small HBCU in the DC area where I teach anatomy and physiology. I'm also an entrepreneur where I have a small consulting company. And so for me, all three of those things align. So I'm fortunate that my passion, my purpose, and my position have all kind of worked together. And the focus of that is to encourage more individuals, expose more individuals, I would say, to STEM education and their options. And those individuals include people who are historically marginalized, so groups and voices that we don't typically see at the table around STEM and STEM education, STEM engagement. It's my interest, my purpose, my passion to elevate those voices and expose them to as many opportunities that STEM can afford. For me, Women's History Month, when I think of it, I think of representation. I think of it as an opportunity to highlight and elevate the voices of women, the experiences of women, and promote examples for other people to understand the type of work that has been done and that is possible to be done.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And I think, Marge, you wanted to come back and answer the question.
Thanks. Sorry. Yeah,
No
I forgot
problem.
about that. But Women's History Month is so important. And as my wonderful fellow panelists have said, for me, it's about also the women who, you know, maybe they're not famous. They don't have a lot of fanfare, but they have enabled and really uplifted us and allowed other women to succeed. So mothers, teachers, role models, all the women in history and in our lives.
Great. Thank you so much. I think it's really important, you know, to really just kind of talk about, you know, where we've come from in terms of women in just women generally, and then women in the space of STEAM, and how much further we still have to go. I mean, I don't know if you all have, you know, seen the news where there was a report done in terms of the NCAA and just the differences between the men's weight room and the women's weight room. So it's like, yeah, we've come a long way. We now have the WNBA, but yet still you see these differences. And so I think it's important, again, that we're able to talk about this, share this information, and just point these things out that, yeah, okay, we've been given certain allowances, but that doesn't mean that's where it stops. We still have to continue the work, continue to have these conversations. So I really appreciate you all really sharing, you know, what Women's History Month means to you. So I'm going to jump right in with a sort of controversial question just from the beginning, and just ask you all to talk about the moment that you realized or knew like your gender was being treated different than the opposite sex. And that could be anything just in terms of as a small child, related to your career, any experience that you want to give. So I'll start with you, Ashley.
I think for me, it was probably in high school. I took a chemistry course, which would eventually lead to just my plight in life. I majored in chemistry and graduated with a chemistry degree. And I was taking a chemistry course, and there were not a lot of women in chemistry. And so the few that were in there had been placed in there on purpose. And I mean, I've been placed in there, they didn't choose it. I chose to take it early. And my enthusiasm behind it was kind of viewed shockingly by my professor. I will say for me, I know we're talking about women, but as a woman who has the intersection of being a woman and being Black, they're usually this kind of compounded this moment, and it's usually both of them together around the fact that I'm a Black woman who is interested in chemistry, and that usually adds an extra layer of complexity when I'm navigating gender or ethnicity in this space. But for me, it was my high school chemistry course, which I loved. I aced. It laid the path, but there was definitely people were taken aback by the enthusiasm because others around me had not been as enthusiastic about it.
That is really interesting as you talk about those different, you know, just intersectionalities. So, you know, Samani, I'll ask you the same question. What was that moment for you that you realized your gender was coming into play?
Yeah, so in my personal experience, I was very lucky to grow up surrounded by women scientists. My mom was a microbiologist and she worked at the university. She was the technician who prepared the materials for the microbiology courses. So I was surrounded by microbiology and professors. And then when I went to grad school here in the United States, I went into a lab that was extremely supportive. But then I went to do my postdoc position, and I was the only female in a group of 9 males. And that's when I started noticing different behaviors towards my person. For example, in lab meetings, I would answer a question and it would go unheard. And then I would have my lab mate repeat the same answer and he would get acknowledged. But he worked as my ally because he would say, yeah, that's what she just said.
That's great.
But then I had another experience in the same lab when a graduate student came to me and said, you know what? I would never work for you. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not hiring, but why wouldn't you work for me? And it's like, oh, because women cannot be trusted. They are too moody. It's like, so you're not even seeing my science, you're not seeing my potential. It's just who I am as a woman. That's the determinant. And that was the first moment when I knew that I was being judged for being a woman and not for being a scientist.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. I wonder where he is right now.
No idea.
Oh my goodness. Oh, Kristen, what about your experience?
Yeah, similarly, I grew up with a very supportive family and friends. I had a lot of girl friends who were very interested in science and, STEM. So I definitely felt supported growing up. I was kind of a tomboy. I loved running around outside. I loved wildlife and nature. So got made fun of a little bit, growing up from my peers, like my classmates. But I think one of the instances, like professionally, that really brought this to light for me was when I was in grad school. I did a workshop in DC where we were meeting with lots of different policymakers across the area about promoting funding for STEM. And we were meeting with lots of these folks who are very heavily involved with these decision making. And one of the things we had to do is create like a 2-pager about our research and how our research is important. And so on my 2-pager, we had a picture of ourselves, and I had a picture of me in the field. So I had like a headlamp on and like a big baggy shirt because I work outside a lot. And of course I was dressed up for these meetings. And so when I handed this 2-pager to one of the folks I was talking to, he looked at the picture and he looked at me and he's like, "This isn't you, is it? You're too pretty to be this person in the picture." And I was like, yeah, and it just really hit home. Like nobody would say that to a guy, I don't think. And so, how do you handle that? And this was a person in a position of power, has decision-making abilities. So it definitely, that was one of the things that I was like, oh, it makes a difference.
Wow. Yeah, no one would definitely have asked the guy like, "Oh, you're too handsome for
Right?
this to be you in this photo here."
Yeah.
So must be someone different.
Yeah.
That's crazy. What about your experience, Marge?
Yeah, interestingly, yet also sadly, it echoes some of the other experiences. So for me, it was also professionally in my early career when I would often be the only woman in a meeting or on a team as an engineer, and I started to notice that when I would try to give feedback, it was already intimidating for me to speak up because I was a woman, and I didn't really realize that until later. So I was already intimidated that way. But when I did muster the courage to speak up, I noticed that, sometimes my feedback would be dismissed, but then if a colleague would say the same thing, that would be accepted and discussed further. And so I would be a bit taken aback. Of course, I wouldn't say anything, but I would just start wondering, didn't I just say that? I
Like,
was just
I'm
getting
not
confused.
crazy.
Yeah, and then and then as Ashley started saying, there are a lot of also different layers, because I was also often the only minority in the room as well. And so I started to have to think about how to tease out, is that because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm a minority? Is it because of nothing at all? Is it the way I personally communicate, which has nothing to do with those two? So that's when I really started thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's it definitely is really crazy how when you bring women together from all different backgrounds, there are so many similarities that we do share, but yet there's still some differences, especially as was pointed out about the intersectionality of being a woman in this field. And so, just like you all have shared, I have very similar experiences, to the same thing. When I was in college, there were 4 women in my electrical engineering class, and one of the professors had the 4 of us stand up. And he told us that he was going to make it his business that we didn't make it out of his class. And that was the first time that I had really heard someone just blatantly, like, it wasn't like behind the scenes, it wasn't whispers. And I just felt like, wow, he really just had the nerve to say this like in front of the whole class, and it was accepted. And when I talked to upperclassmen about it, it was, oh yeah, that professor is like that. And so I think it's a real shame that it's even tolerated. And I think by women just really being more empowered in order to have their voices heard is where we can really just say, like, this is not acceptable. And so with that in vain, some of the questions that I'm asking you have also already come from some middle and high school students who, posed some of the questions that I sent to you all. And one of the things that, really resonated with me when I did a panel even just earlier this morning with some high school students was, how do you learn to really find your voice? To really say, within this space, like, enough is enough, because, everyone has their own level of just, being comfortable with expressing themselves. So, that's the next question I want to pose to you all. Like, how do you, be able to voice your opinion? Are you very comfortable with acknowledging when, when you're uncomfortable or someone is making you uncomfortable? How do you deal with those situations being a woman in this really male dominated field? So I'll start with you and go back to you, Marge.
Okay. How do we make ourselves comfortable with our own voice? I think it's always a work in progress for me personally, because there's so many, we've come a long way, but there are still so many layers there, like we said. So what are good ways to do that? I mean, first of all, self-belief. Self-esteem is really important, especially for people early on in their careers, or in college. There's so many obstacles, so many different messages. So I think it's really important to stand up to those, even in your own mind, and say, I deserve to be here. I belong here. Because I belong here, my voice is important. And so that's the first thing I would say.
Great. What about you, Samani? How do you deal with it?
Um, Interestingly enough, I've always been able to speak up for myself. If I find that the situation is not in my favor, or that I feel like it's going to impact me in a negative way, I do assess the situation and make sure that if I speak up, it's not going to hurt me more. But if I find that it's okay, I do speak up. And I found that it doesn't matter if it's a position of authority who I'm speaking up against. I've always have. And so I've been able to fight my way out of situations just by speaking my mind.
That's really great. You know,
Yeah.
everyone, you know, may not be as comfortable. But you know, like someone else even mentioned,
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's something that, you know, grows with you, even in time from experiences and situations. What have been your experience and what advice would you have, Kristen?
Yeah, I think similarly to that, I think it's kind of several steps in the process, right? I think you need to identify what you bring to the table and what your strengths are, because your strengths might be different from somebody else's. And you don't have to be great at everything, right? And recognizing where those strengths and I don't want to say weaknesses, but the things that you're not the best at are. And then when you're in those situations where you're uncomfortable, I think asking for help is important. Asking for help from people you look up to has been really helpful for me. And kind of watching those people that you admire and watch how they interact in these situations. And then you can take kind of tips from their playbook as you develop more practice, pull those things that you admire about how they interact. And so, yeah, I think just being able to recognize that you have your own strengths and offer that, and learn from others.
Yeah, great points. What about you, Ashley?
So I think it's very important to have what the literature calls counter spaces or safe spaces. So groups where your gender is not um, it's not an issue, it's not a priority, and so you may be surrounded by other women. I feel like finding those spaces recharges me, and it allows me to kind of let my hair down and relax. It also offers me insight into what other people are going through to understand that I'm not alone, which adds to my confidence that I'm not crazy, I'm not projecting, I'm not making something up. I also think finding your voice and being self-aware, which is something that my other colleagues have mentioned. Once you understand who you are, what you are, and why you are, I think it helps you when you step into a room to exude that and to give off that energy. I know for me, I can't speak for others. It took it it evolved for me.
Mhm.
I went to an
Yeah.
all girls college, and so gender was not a factor in the classroom or on campus. But just even understanding my place in society and what I brought to the table, it evolved over time, and I got confident in that. So I was able to say, I don't know what that means, or can you explain more, and not feel as though I was incompetent or I should have known, or everyone else knows and I don't know. And even if that's the case, I don't know and I need to know, right? But there's a level of confidence I think that comes as you matriculate through your career and as you matriculate through life, because you begin to understand that those perceptions and those thoughts that other people may have about you for whatever reason are not as important as your own clarity and self-comfort and self-awareness.
Yeah, I mean that definitely is an excellent point. And someone also mentioned, you know, asking for help. For some people, you know, have a little thicker skin than others, right? And so sometimes you may need someone to be able to advocate on your behalf. Or, I mean, personally, you know, I tell people I have evolved and grown to a place where, and I don't know if it's, you know, from just my experiences or you know, like you mentioned, Ashley, you get older. And so I'm really at a place, you know, in my life where I'm just like, I just don't care. You know, and you get to a certain level and you're like, I just don't care what you think. You know, if it's something that makes me uncomfortable, I have to tell you. Right. And so when I see other women that may not be able to express that, you know, I will reach out to them and let them know, like, if you need help, I will tell you some of the things that I do. Now, they might not work for you. I don't want you to get fired, right? So, but these are some things that I do, or if I'm in the same, you know, company or something like that, I will advocate, I will speak up for you. It may be times where you know, you want me to say something on your behalf. I don't have a problem with doing that. But I think that the more as women we're able to come together, have these conversations, then you learn different things. You know, somebody may have a great tool for how to be able to negotiate, you know, a higher salary, or, you know, Ashley may have a way, you know, for you to be able to say, I need additional resources. And this is the way that I asked, and this is how I was able to get it. And so, you know, just being able to talk to other women in spaces like this and other more informal spaces, I think will really help, especially as we all have, different backgrounds. So thank you all for those answers. And that actually leads into my next question in terms of just different backgrounds and things. So, we're all women in STEM and STEAM. And so we don't only just do one particular thing. And I think it's really important as we talk about the intersectionality of being a woman in this area, the fact that women in this area are not monolithic either in terms of what they do. So if you could just kind of talk about and share some of the other things that you're doing that may have impacted your particular career, or maybe something that's totally different that you like to do, that's different than, science and engineering all the time. And just talk about some of those things and maybe how you've incorporated some of those things into your work. So I'll start with you, Ashley.
So as I mentioned, a lot of my outreach, a lot of my mentoring revolves around STEM. Outside of work and outside of that, I'm a person who loves experiences. I'm what we consider a nerd. So in those experiences, I still see science, but I love to cook. I love to travel. I love to just experience different cultures and understand. So for me, history has been a really, I've just been mesmerized by history for a very long time, especially African-American history. And so if I could go back and do it all over again, I probably would minor in African-American history, but I didn't know that was an option. I thought I only had to focus on chemistry, right? But understanding how those two come together and just the history of the US, especially around education for me. So as I seek out experiences, I find myself gravitating toward that in the experience, whether it is visiting a different country and taking a tour and understanding that country's background, that country's culture, or going to a food and wine festival and talking to the person who made the wine and how they made the wine has been a thing. It has happened. And so those things for me are the reasons why I fell in love with chemistry to start off with, just because it's all around us. And so I find that it just comes up like word vomit whenever I'm doing anything that's not work related.
That's so funny. So even as sometimes you tend to go off into other areas, like it just still brings you back, like the science still just draws you back and helps you to understand how it actually, may collaborate or is intertwined. That's really interesting. Yeah. Kristen, what about you?
Yeah, I'm when I get asked like what my hobbies are, I do have some, like I like bird watching. I have a lot of backyard bird feeders. I like doing yoga. But I mean, honestly, for me, outreach and education about bats really is what I like to do for fun. So it works really well that I am a bat conservationist, and that a huge part of bat conservation is education and outreach. Because there's a lot of misconceptions about bats and fears about bats. I know we were chatting earlier.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I just love chatting with people about, the importance of bats, how neat they are, and the benefits that they bring to us. So, I do a lot of like presentations, but also hands-on activities like kids activities and festivals with booths about bats and bat walks in the evening and building bat houses. So it's just, for me, it's part of what makes me happy. So I'm really lucky in that aspect. But I think one of the big things in my life growing up was Girl Scouts. I am a lifetime member of Girl Scouts and went all the way through from kindergarten through high school, and then continued actually in college and started a campus Girl Scout group at my undergrad. So for me, that was really what got me into bat conservation. Like I mentioned, building bat houses in 6th grade. And now I actually get to do that with Girl Scout troops and help them build bat houses and help them do their own bat projects. So it's kind of come full circle. And for me, that, that makes me so, so happy.
So if you guys didn't know that Kristen was passionate about bats, then now you know she loves bats. And I think that it's really awesome how, in asking this question, some of you who have already shared just really talks about, kind of your passion and how your passion also meets your profession, right? And the ability to be able to bring those two together is really what, I like to convey when I'm talking to students as well. So Marge, what are some of your things you love to do?
Thanks. I love hearing that, Kristen. I love hearing how, you love what you do, and you can see it in how you talk about it. And that's the same with me. So as I was progressing through my engineering career, I also seemed to be gravitating a lot towards, mentoring, and all my volunteer work would be with youth and younger engineers. And I was really astounded when I found out about 10 years ago that people do college advising as a career. And I honestly was so excited and thrilled because we were talking earlier about knowing your strengths and using your strengths. And I was just so literally, my body was excited about the possibility of doing this, and kind of putting together my engineering background and helping girls to understand that, this is engineering, and this is how you find colleges, and this is how you apply to college. And I'm a first gen to college, and so there's that piece too. I'm really motivated by trying to help first generation students as well. And so all of that kind of mushed together into eventually me being able to start an independent practice and do that while also still doing engineering work. So it's been really great that way.
That's great. I love that you really, Marge, just pointed out how you were, still passionate about engineering, but you found a way in a space that you really wanted to help students who were like yourself and maybe didn't have that kind of guidance, and maybe whose families didn't have the information to even be able to support and advise them. And so, which is really important. And so you started a business. You could have even just said, okay, let me see what other places I could work for. But I think that's something else just important to really just expose girls to. Even, as young girls, you can be an entrepreneur. And that was something that wasn't, really talked to me about as a girl. And so I love when I hear women tell girls, that you can be your own boss, right? Not bossy, but you can be the boss, right? And that's being a leader. So definitely appreciate that. What about you, Samani?
Yeah, I'm gonna follow up a little bit on March. So how I started about 7 years ago, I was hired to a lecturer. It's an adjunct faculty position, and it's just teaching. But then during teaching, I would advise the students while I was lecturing. And this got to one of the programs on campus, and the students said, like, you need to hire this person to be an advisor for us. And so they approached me, and I started advising for this one program. And today I only do 20% of teaching, and the rest of my time is running programs that are meant for recruiting and retention for underrepresented students, like the LSAM program or the RISE program. I help run the alliance that constitute all 23 campuses of the CSU. And then I also help run the one at Sacramento State with the RISE program. So if you see, like, I'm a lecturer, that is really only 20% of what I do. Aside from that, it's my passion is that I love to mentor and promote and highlight my students and engage in diversity efforts and community service. And that has translated into my art. I don't have official training in art, so it's just self-taught.
Wow,
And
I would never have known that.
yes. And so what I've been doing is that I have moved my passion for diversity into a visual medium, and now I'm sharing it in social media. And with that sharing has come so many opportunities that now I work as an independent illustrator, and I have contracts working with companies and other schools, making their logos and flyers and things like that. And from there, now it also moved into me founding our own initiative of highlighting and promoting women in STEM that are from Puerto Rico. So all of these things are related to one another, and they're all based on my passion and what I love to do. So from like 9 to 5, I work for school, and then from 5 to 9, I work in my art, and then I watch TV and I go to bed.
Again, it's, even bringing you all together, I was not even aware of just the transitions of just what you do in terms of things you love versus your actual work and your profession. And so I love that you all shared that, because you can definitely see it, right? So your passion for not only your profession, but what you love to do, it really comes together, and you can definitely see that. And that's why, having these conversations again and just being able to expose girls to these role models, which, I know I didn't have, and I know even talking to some of you, you may not have had growing up. And I think that is really important. Very similar stories to what you all have shared, being an engineer myself and working in industry, I just constantly saw, again, the lack of women, the lack of minorities, and really just, kind of made a pivot into nonprofits, where I really wanted to go into that space to be able to at least show girls and minorities what the options were, right? And all the work that we're all doing is not because we're trying to make every kid a scientist or an engineer, but I think being able to have at least them have options, to say, okay, I tried, doing biomedical research, and that's really not for me. I'm not sure that I really love bats. I appreciate them, but I don't know if that's for me. So I think that, for them to be able to just maybe eliminate some things, but you can't eliminate things if you don't even have those options. And so, I love that you all just, really brought that, together in terms of your passion, and then also what you're doing in your professional spaces. So within that, and talking about messaging, what would you all say are maybe some of the exciting things that you really see maybe in media and technology that, have come out recently that maybe you didn't see initially when you first started? That you think can help girls, or if you aren't seeing as much as you would like, what do you think is that messaging that still should be promoted within media and technology today? I'll start with you, Kristen.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked this, because one of the initiatives that I'm part of is the If Then initiative. And Aisha, you are too. We are both ambassadors for this If Then program. And what it is it's an initiative to highlight and elevate current women in STEM fields across a wide variety of fields, wide variety of, career stages. And so as part of this, the motto is, if you can see it, you can be it, right? And so there's the If Then collection online now, where you just Google If Then collection. And it's a collection of over 100 women in all of these different STEM fields. And it shows their bios, what their interests are, their social media. And it really allows kids and adults to see just the variety and the diversity that's out there. And like you were saying, like if we can show them what's out there, we can show kids what's out there, then they can pick what they're most interested in. And so I think that's a really great resource that obviously we didn't have growing up. It's a huge, I think, movement forward to advance these different fields.
I would say definitely check it out. Like she said, even for adults, like I'm always amazed when I read about some of the other women. I'm like, wow, I didn't know they did this or they did that. So definitely a great resource. What about you, Ashley?
I would say for me, one, just the variety of women that I meet, as well as the variety of things that women are doing. I love that we are not a monolith. I love that, and even with your career, I was talking to a group of students yesterday, and I told them, I was like, I basically a la carted my career. I did not take just one path and just teach or just do outreach. And so I think for me, that has been critical. And so seeing more examples of that, seeing more examples of people owning their career and not just doing what was done, or if you have a PhD, you have to go into academia and do research, but carving out those spaces that people once thought were not there, and knowing that women are doing it, especially whether we want to or not, right? Life either forces us to do it to show you that I can work from home because I need to raise my kids while also running your business and nothing changed, or by showing you that if I bring my children to a conference, I'm still attentive, I can still give you a keynote. We are creating these spaces and we are normalizing things that have not traditionally been normalized. And so for me, those are kind of the eye-opening things that I'm seeing. And it feels like it feels like a movement. I mean, it could just be my, my programming, because the people I'm surrounded by are like-minded. So we're all doing these things, but that nuance around creating your own career, taking the pieces that you love and the pieces that you don't love and kind of, pushing them and arranging them to make yourself comfortable and owning that is something that I think I'm seeing more of, and I love that.
Great. What about you, Marge?
I'm loving the responses so far. Yeah. In terms of messaging, I think there's still, of course, a lot to be done. I, also appreciate for my students, but also for myself, continuing to see evolving representations of women all around us in the media and social media, in our lives, in our careers. So one, I guess I've been trying to reach out a bit more and understand more of that side of, more of those representations so that I can help my students interpret and understand them. So one way is I recently joined it's the Gina Davis Institute on Gender in Media. And Aisha, I think you're also part of it as well. And so this is a nonprofit that studies these representations in current media, representations of women and representations of women in STEM, representations of people of color. So that's really helpful in having a resource and a network to be able to understand and, convey to my students that this is still something that may impact you. You might not realize it. Let's talk about this. And then on the bright side, there are things that we're seeing around us, like you've all said, that do reflect more progress. So for example, in the media, we're seeing more women in STEM, we're seeing more balanced women in family roles and professional technical roles. And so I guess that's my answer, seeking out other resources and networks and being able to help our young people that way.
Great. Yeah. If you guys have not heard of it, I would definitely recommend checking out the Gina Davis Institute Media Group. It's awesome. What about you, Samadi?
Well, for me, and this is what I've experienced with my students, and I agree with my other panelists here, is that when I teach a group of freshmen and it's the first day of class, and I say, okay, raise your hand if you want to go into med school. 23 out of 25 raise their hands. And so we know that not all 23 of that one freshman class will go into med school. So what are the other options that are out there? You're here in science, and it's because you're passionate about science. Your answer is that you want to serve people, you want to help people. Medicine is not the only way that this is done. So and this is I guess, shameless plug, I guess. But aside from drawing women, I draw the different types of scientists with the idea of informing and telling the audiences of all these different fields and subfields and subfields that exist out there. In the last 2 years, I have learned about these obscure sciences that I have never in my life heard of. And they are fascinating and fun. And the scientists who work those areas are very passionate. And so when I draw, it's with the purpose of also teaching about a new field so that people are aware that there are so many things that we can do. And I think that we are in the right path with all these panels that we are participating on, and we are bringing people from all these fields and all these backgrounds to show the diversity of the enterprise that is sciences.
Yeah, I mean, it really is key. And, just as, someone mentioned already, the messages and images that we are seeing in the media have definitely been more representative of women and minorities in these spaces, but we definitely need to see more, right? I love seeing the commercials that even many of the companies have that are for like the STEM Education Council. There are commercials that I've seen for Girl Scouts. I didn't see commercials on TV for Girl Scouts. I was a Girl Scout too, Kristen. I didn't see commercials for Girl Scouts. And so now you see not only the Girl Scouts, but I love even the whole campaign that Girl Scouts has around the alumni. So now these young girls can see, who, they could potentially become with looking at the women who were Girl Scouts and all the different industries and career paths that they have taken. I think it's super important. And there's also a show now on Mission Unstoppable that really showcases many of the ambassadors that are in If Them, but other scientists and engineers who are women as well. And it really shows their careers. And that's something that, you can see on television. And even when I watch with my daughter, sometimes I'm like in awe, like, wow, I get really excited. Like, that's so cool. I never thought about that before. And so being able to have that on, even just like CSI, right? Like, I love CSI and seeing the women who are in those shows where, I didn't have the ability to see that, when I was growing up in the 80s, dating myself, but like there were a lot of law shows on TV and my mother loved watching law shows, right? And so for me, that's how I picked my career initially, because I saw a lot of glamorous women. None of them looked like me, but they still were glamorous and they carried a briefcase. And carrying a briefcase in the 80s was everything. Like if you carried a briefcase, you were somebody. So I was like, I need to be a lawyer so I could carry a briefcase, right? And that's what I said I wanted to do. I wanted to be a lawyer initially. But I think that the more we're able to have images on TV where girls and boys and, can see them and see themselves and see opportunities, the better it is. The panels that we're doing are great. Making sure teachers understand are great, but kids are now gravitated even more towards the media. Now there's social media and all of those things going on. And I think actually you brought up a point as well, just about how you're even being seen. And I think COVID has really, even though we're all still trying to get out of the house slowly, I think COVID has, for at least for me, really, I think not exposed, I think just shown like the more human side of people, right? Because I'm in the house, my husband's in the house, our two kids are in the house, our dog is in the house. And so if I'm at work and I'm on a Zoom, you may hear some noise, right? You may hear the dog at the door trying to get in because she's mad the door is closed. You may see me glance because one of my kids have come into the room, even though I told them mommy has a piano, right? So it's just, and I think that from this whole year, initially, people had to get used to that. But I think now it's like, you're home. What are you going to do if somebody knocks on your door, right? And so I think it has humanized us. I've even seen, some instances being on other panels where women and men have actually had their babies like on their lap. That was something that before COVID, I never saw before anything that I did. So I think it has really like humanized us, even for my kids, for some of them with their teachers. They're like talking to their teachers' kids, like, oh, her little baby is on, so then now they feel like, oh, my teacher is a human being, right? Not just my teacher. And so I think that those images have really helped with, only having to be virtual. And then the ability to reach out more than just the United States. I've done panels with girls who are in Africa Whereas like, I didn't do that before, you know, and having the ability to do it, but I just didn't, you know, because we still had, the, you know, the ability to do virtual stuff. So I think all of those things are important. I'm excited about what I see now. And, you know, I'm excited, you know, like you all, about what is to come as well. So thank you for sharing that. I think what I want to do now is just to ask you about, you know, maybe like, what's the best piece of advice that you've received, you know, being in this space, you know, to girls and young women who are maybe not necessarily interested in, you know, pursuing any of these fields that you have gotten, maybe from another woman, or just that you have learned in your experience that you want to share. And I'll start with you, Kristen.
Yeah, I think this is kind of general life advice, but my mom especially always pushed me to do things, right? Like I was always super involved with clubs and activities and like extracurriculars growing up, and that has carried over into my adult life. And I think one of the kind of sentiments that she instilled in me is, if you don't put yourself out there, you won't get out there. So really just pushing yourself, even if it's something you're a little scared of or it's not your forte, you know, pushing yourself, and you can learn, and you get recognized, you get exposed to people, and you meet people and you network. So I think just taking those opportunities, you never know where they will lead. So put yourself out there.
Yeah, doesn't hurt.
Yep.
Somebody.
Yeah, I definitely second Kristen, talking about opportunities. That is the big word. Opportunities will come your way. People is going to reach out to you and say, hey, I would love for you to do this. Hey, I have this opportunity. And opportunity sometimes equals job. And they just like paraphrase it that way. And sometimes you may feel like you are not worthy, or that you don't belong in that space, or you're just a little hesitant. And you may say, you know what, I'm going to say no, but think about it. And then maybe I'll say yes. Do the opposite. Say yes. Think about it. And if it doesn't work out for you, then say no. Because if you hesitate or if you say no, they are going to offer that opportunity to somebody else. And it can be in 5 minutes, and that opportunity is gone. And if you do say yes and you're still very hesitant and you feel like you're not doing a good job, I always told myself, fake it to make it, where I would just like put a costume about, yes, this is me, I'm a professional, I know what I'm doing, and you're gonna think that I know what I'm doing. And so that actually did work.
Yes, that is the quote, fake it till you make it. That's what you have to do. And I love that. It's really, really key, because, you know, I think a lot of times, and what we've even seen in some research, where a man may, you know, if he's going for a job, say, okay, I have two of these requirements, but I'm gonna still apply. And a woman may say, man, I don't, she may have 8 out of the 10 and still feel like, I don't have 10, so I'm not gonna apply. And so I think that is definitely some great advice. You have to put yourself out there, as Kristen said, and you got to fake it till you make it, and understand that you have the ability. So great. What about you, Marge?
Yes, it echoes what you all have said. And that's really understanding the power of helping each other, collaboration, networking. So personally, I didn't understand that until a bit later on in my career, because I didn't understand, number one, the power of that. And I didn't understand that I also had things to offer in a networking and professional relationship. So I would tell young people, you know, you do have things to bring to the table. So networking is about people helping each other and sharing your strengths. And so that's my piece of advice, to really look at networking differently, look at it as relationships, and don't be afraid, like you all have said, you know, put yourself out there, fake it till you make it, just get out there, put yourself out into the world and see. People will open doors for you. You will have opportunities. You have to go out and get them and seize them and walk through those doors, but it's there for you.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Marge. Ashley?
So similar, my mom, I mean, I'm from the South, so everything is phrased in a cute, fun, deep, description that you're like, why couldn't you just say that in layman's terms? But my mom would always tell us, nothing beats a failure but a try. And also what's the worst that could happen. And so for her, it's similar to what my panelists have, that my fellow panelists have said. You never know what's going to happen unless you try. So the only thing that's going to, nothing beats a failure but a try. So you need to give it a try. You need to be able to check off and say, I tried to do this. She also paired that with what's the worst that could happen. Someone tells you no and you stay in the same position, or someone tells you yes and you get to elevate or change. And so she used that as guiding principles for my sister and I, as well as her nieces and nephews, to encourage us to try new things, to step out there. It still took a lot longer for me to truly get that and implement it as an adult, but it always stuck with me in this thought of moving past fear, or moving in your fear, to still pursue and try to do things.
Yeah, I think that, like you've all said, you don't know what you don't know if you don't try, right? And you don't investigate. And all, us all being, scientists and engineers, we know about testing, right? And doing several tests. And the first test isn't always going to work, right? So, changing the variable to something else and seeing if that will work, and, the engineering design process. And so it's the same thing in life. And I'm glad that you all were able to, lend your advice, things that, were told to you, and being able to share them. So I know we have a few minutes, but I did also want to ask one additional question before we go. And it is around like challenges. And it is a heavy question to have be the last one. But I would like to ask you all if you could just speak to that, quickly, about maybe a challenge that you faced, and, like how you were able to deal with it, if you could do that. So I will start with you, Kristen.
Yeah, so I recently completed my PhD last year. And so thank you. Imposter syndrome for me was a big thing. Even now I'm like, why did they give me this PhD? I think, so that has been a challenge. I think we all face that. We don't think we're good enough. We don't think we belong in the space, right? So I think that I still struggle, but knowing that those people, your committee or your bosses, they would not have given you that, or given you, if you didn't earn it, if you didn't deserve it.
I'm glad you said give you, girl, because you work for that.
I know.
I'm like, wait, I didn't want to jump in, but I'm like, they didn't give you anything.
That's a good point.
They conferred it for you, which is a process we could talk about later, but you worked to get your degree. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was like, they didn't give you anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, see, and it still like seeps into in your brain. It like never goes away. But recognizing that you do deserve it, and I think that's just reminding yourself every day, even when you're struggling, and acknowledging that you will have those bad days, and that's okay. Yeah.
And having people remind you. So go into Ashley.
So mine has been challenging my thoughts, right? Shout out to my therapist for ingraining that in me, but it's been challenging my thoughts. So challenging my words and challenging my thoughts around how I view situations, because I've had my PhD, I finished in 2013. I still have imposter syndrome. I still have those moments where I'm like, if I can do this, then anybody can do this. And the fact of the matter is 2% of the population has a PhD. So something has to be said about those. And that's all PhDs. STEM PhDs are smaller. So there's something to be said about those who have actually finished and crossed the finish line. So for me, the barrier comes with challenging those thoughts, those negative thoughts around myself, listening to what I tell my mentees and what I tell other people on panels, and making sure that I internalize that and tell it to myself. So the biggest barrier is believing what I tell others that I know is true.
So the biggest barrier is you.
Right. I didn't want to say I was my own, but yes, applying it to myself so that I can continue to move and be great, the same way I'm motivating other people to do those things.
That's good. Thanks for sharing that, Ashley. I think that a lot of times, when people see you, especially if you're mentoring and you're helping other people, they think that you're fine and you got it all together, all done. But everyone needs help, no matter like at what level you are. So I appreciate you sharing that. Marge?
Yeah, I think something that's evolved over time is just understanding that you don't, for me personally, I don't have to take things personally. That took a long time to just experience. So, for example, um, kind of early midpoint in my career, there was some downsizing, and I had to leave the company I was with, and it took a while to that was definitely a challenge, an obstacle, because it takes a while to learn that things happen. There are economic cycles, there are a plethora of other reasons for things to happen. um you know Things are not necessarily your doing or your fault, and so you just pick up, you stand up, and you move on. It's not a reflection on you. That's just one. If I were to give a piece of advice about that, just keep pushing through. It's not there are negative things that happen, but it's not a negative kind of impedance in your life.
Right. Some things it's not personal, it's just
It's not.
business.
It's
You
just
just have
business.
to know which one.
Yeah, exactly.
Samani. Thanks, Marge.
Yeah, for me, it was interesting. It was not self-imposed, so it wasn't like imposter syndrome or anything. It was more like somebody took my STEM identity away from me. Like I always saw myself as a scientist. I saw myself as being in the right space. But then once I got hired as a lecturer, when you're an adjunct professor, you do not have a research lab. And as you move up, you are less and less in the lab. Even though I do volunteer as a PI, it's not my own lab. And so the fact that I don't do research and I don't have my own lab, for other scientists, they did not see me as a scientist. For example, I went to a big conference and I was in a table, and this man sat next to me and very politely was like, "Oh, so what's your name?" And I told him my name. I said, "So what's your research?" I actually don't do research. I'm a lecturer. He immediately turned his back on me and started talking to the next person over. And so the fact that you equate research with scientists, for me, has been my challenge. And working as a lecturer also impedes me from getting grants that I want to write. So I have to find somebody who will help me write so they can put their name and be considered the scientist. So I have to see myself, analyze myself, and gain that identity back, which I struggled with. Now I have gained it back because I solved it by doing my artwork. That's where it came from. It came from a moment where I was sad. I lost my STEM identity and I didn't know who I was anymore until I decided I am going to draw myself as a scientist. And I drew like the lecturer. And this is a person who teaches science. It's a scientist who teaches. It's not a teacher who teaches science. So it's just it's a very important difference. And so it's gaining that identity back and knowing my sense of belonging.
Wow. See, you learn something new every day, because I would have never thought that someone would, just because you aren't doing research, just consider you not to be a scientist. And
It's been more than someone. It's been definitely
several
several people in my.
I'll say. Yeah. So that is, something new that, I learned. I just, especially because you have a PhD, automatically I would assume that it would come with that. But, it's good to know that these things are out there so that we can definitely support and help one another. I also love that you pointed out the fact that, because in your sadness, you use that as a way to really bring out your art and your artistic side. And so there was a reason you had to really even go through that, and we would never probably see all of the beautiful artwork that you have today. So thank you and thank you all for just being vulnerable to just talk about some of your experiences, what you went through, and also to share advice. I really appreciate it. And I know that people are watching and who will be able to watch will definitely appreciate it as well. So I want to thank all of our panelists for being here with us. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion, because I have thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. I want to also tell you, just to continue to keep watching STEAM Dreamers. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will find videos of all of these women, as well as videos of other panelists who have participated. And the recording for this session will actually be up shortly, and you'll get notified when it's there. So thank you all again. I know we went a few minutes over, but I appreciate the panelists staying with us because this is important work. And I think it's important for us all, again, as empowered women, empower other women. And I think that's really key. So thank you, panelists, for being with us. Thank you all. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. In many places, it's very hot with a lot of sunshine. So please get out and get off of the computer and enjoy that, and have a good rest of your weekend. Definitely appreciate it. And thank you for watching another episode of STEAM Dreamers.